The basket of ripe mangoes burst open across the stone walkway, rolling like golden marbles under the midday sun. Nia's body slammed against the edge of the wooden stall, her palms scraping rough splinters as she twisted to shield her 7-month belly. Gasps rippled through the busy market as fabric tore and her headscarf slipped to the ground. The chev had been hard to harden. Everyone saw who did it. Cato stood over her, breathing fast, his expensive leather sandals inches from her hand, his face twisted with contempt. "Stay where you belong," he spat, loud enough for nearby traders to hear. On the ground, begging like you always did. Pain throbbed through Nia's wrist, but fear flooded her chest faster than any bruise. "The baby!" She pressed her palm to her belly, whispering a silent prayer. Around her, the smell of roasted maize, dried fish, and hot dust swirled together, but the familiar market suddenly felt like hostile ground. Women who once greeted her now looked away, unsure whether to help or avoid trouble. Cato's fiancée, a tall woman named Zuri, stood beside him, her gold bracelets clinking as she folded her arms. Her smile was thin, sharp as a knife's edge. "Look at her," she said, loud enough for the fruit vendors to hear. "Pregnant again. Does she even know who the father is this time?" A murmur spread. Nia's cheeks burned hotter than the afternoon sun. She had heard words like that before from Cato's mother, from his cousins, from neighbors who believed gossip more easily than truth. "This child has nothing to do with you," Nia said softly, trying to push herself upright. Her voice trembled despite her effort to sound strong. "Let me pass." Cato laughed, a cruel, bitter sound. "Nothing to do with me. After you trapped me with a pregnancy before, now you're back with another man's baby, hoping for his money." The memory struck like lightning. 9 months earlier, she had stood in the courtyard of Kaito's family compound, rain pouring down her back as his mother shouted insults. They had called her a liar, a beggar, a woman trying to steal their son's future. Then the gate had slammed behind her, and she'd walked into the storm with nowhere to go. Nia swallowed hard. "I lost that baby," she whispered, "the night your family threw me out." Cato's face flickered, but only for a second. Then his eyes hardened again. "You expect me to believe that story?" "You chased me into the rain," she said, voice breaking. "I nearly died on that road." The market noise faded into a dull roar in her ears as the memory returned. The slippery asphalt, the blinding headlights, the sound of tires screeching, strong hands pulling her from the street just before the car could hit her. "Liar," Zuri snapped. "Women like you always have a story." Nia tried to step around them, but Cato grabbed her arm. His grip tightened until pain shot through her shoulder. "Who is the father?" he demanded. "Another rich man you fooled." "Let go of me," she said, her breath coming fast. "You're hurting me." Instead, he shoved her again. Her heel slipped on a crushed mango. The world tilted. She reached for anything air. Cloth, wood, but found nothing. Her back struck a stack of baskets, and they toppled over her, scattering oranges across the ground. A sharp cry escaped her lips as pain shot up her spine. For a hot beat, the market froze. Then 2 men in dark suits appeared from the crowd, moving with quiet purpose. One seized Cato's wrist and twisted it away from Nia. The other stepped between her and Zuri. "Release her," the taller man said calmly. Cato struggled. "Do you know who I am?" The man didn't even blink. "We know exactly who you are." Nia's phone skidded across the ground, stopping near a sack of cassava. The screen lit up with a familiar name. Amani. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. Every part of her body hurt, but only one thing mattered. She pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello, Nia," came the deep, steady voice. "What happened?" I heard shouting. "I'm at the Central Market," she said, fighting tears. "I fell." "The baby." His voice dropped, suddenly sharp. "Are you hurt?" "I don't know yet." A brief silence. Then she heard muffled commands in the background, his tone shifting into something cold and controlled. "Stay where you are," he said. "Don't move." "I'm coming," she swallowed. "Cato is here." Another pause. This one felt heavier. "The same man who abandoned you?" Amani asked quietly. "Yes." "Good," he said, his voice now like steel. "I have been waiting to meet him." Kato's face drained of color as he heard the name. "Amani, you mean the man who saved me that night?" Naya said, slowly pushing herself to her feet. Her hand stayed over her belly. "The father of this child." The market crowd grew silent, sensing the shift. Even the vendors stopped shouting their prices. Kaido's shoulders sagged. As realization dawned, the two suited men tightened their grip on him. Naya looked at him, her voice calm but firm. "You have 10 minutes before he gets here," she said. "I suggest you use them wisely. What happens when the man you thought you broke returns as someone you can no longer touch?" The question hung in the air as the market slowly filled with whispers, eyes darting between Nia and Kato. Nobody rushed to help him now. Power had shifted, and everyone felt it in their bones. Traders who once feared Kato's family suddenly found urgent reasons to adjust their displays or retreat behind their stalls. The heat felt heavier, as if the sun itself was waiting. Nia leaned against a wooden pillar. Breathing carefully, every inhale measured to calm the storm inside her chest. One of the suited men crouched beside her, his voice low and respectful. "Madame, can you stand?" She nodded, though her legs trembled, and he helped her onto a crate padded with folded cloth. Zuri hovered a few steps back, her earlier confidence melting into stiff silence, gold bracelets no longer clinking. Kaito tried to speak, but the grip on his arms tightened. "This is a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "She's lying. She always lies." His voice cracked at the end, betraying fear. He glanced around, searching for familiar faces, but found none willing to meet his eyes. Naya closed her eyes for a moment, memories crashing over her like waves. The night rain soaked her dress, the road slick beneath her bare feet, the feeling that the world had decided she was disposable. She had survived that night by chance and kindness. Nothing more, and now that same chance was about to walk back into her life with intention. The sound came first engines, low and steady, not rushed but deliberate. Conversations died instantly. Heads turned toward the market entrance as 3 black SUVs rolled in and stopped with perfect alignment. Doors opened in unison, and men in dark clothing stepped out, forming a quiet corridor through the crowd. Then Amani emerged. He moved without haste, tall and composed, dressed in a simple dark tunic that somehow carried more authority than Kato's tailored clothes ever had. His presence pressed down on the market like a sudden change in weather. People stepped aside instinctively, not out of fear alone, but respect. This was a man accustomed to being obeyed. His eyes found Nia immediately. Everything else disappeared. He crossed the space between them in long, purposeful strides, ignoring Kato completely. When he reached her, his expression softened in a way few had ever seen. He knelt in front of her, hands hovering for a second before gently touching her wrist, her shoulder, her back. "Where does it hurt?" he asked quietly. "My wrist," she whispered, "and my back." But the baby she moved. I felt her. Amani exhaled slowly, pressing his forehead briefly to her hand. Relief flickered across his face before vanishing, replaced by something colder. "We're going to the hospital," he said. Now, he stood and turned at last toward Kaito. The temperature seemed to drop. "Kaito." "Mbeki?" Amani said evenly. Not a greeting, but a statement. "I know who you are." Kaito swallowed hard. I didn't know she was your wife." Amani's eyebrow lifted slightly. So, if she wasn't, this would be acceptable. His voice remained calm, almost polite, which made it far more terrifying. "You pushed a pregnant woman in public." "She provoked me," Kato blurted. "She lies about everything. About losing the baby before." Amani's gaze sharpened. "She lost a child because your family threw her into the street in a storm." His tone did not rise. "She bled in a hospital for hours while you celebrated an engagement." The words landed like stones. Zuri's face drained of color. "That's not true," she whispered. But no one listened. "I saved her life that night. Amani continued, not because I wanted anything from her, because she was human. He took a step closer to Cato. Today you tried to take that life again. Kato's knees buckled, and one of the suited men tightened his hold to keep him standing. Please, he said hoarsely, we can talk. We can fix this. Amani shook his head once. You already fixed it, he said, with your hands. He turned back to Nia and lifted her carefully into his arms. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she wrapped her arms around his neck, resting her head against his shoulder. She breathed in his familiar scent and felt, for the first time since the shav, truly safe. Take her to the car, Amani ordered softly. Aste Mobedi spoke again without looking back. Do not let him leave. Or her. His gaze flicked briefly towards Zere. Separate them. Cato's voice rose in panic. Amani, you don't understand what you're starting. Amani paused at the SUV door and looked back, his eyes dark and steady. No, he said. You don't understand what you already finished. The door closed gently behind Naya. As the vehicle pulled away toward the hospital, the market slowly came back to life, buzzing with a new kind of story, and behind them, surrounded by men who no longer saw him as untouchable, Cato finally realized that the past he tried to bury had returned with witnesses. Have you ever walked through a storm so heavy it felt like the sky itself was trying to erase you? That was the night Nia's life broke into two, pieces the woman she used to be, and the one she would become. The memory returned as the car sped through the streets toward the hospital, each streetlight flashing across the window like a heartbeat. Naya closed her eyes, and the present melted into the sound of thunder from months ago. Even now, the rain still lived somewhere inside her bones. 9 months earlier, the air had been thick with the scent of wet earth and anger. Nia stood in the courtyard of Cato's family compound, her small bag at her feet, rain pouring down her back. The red clay under her sandals had turned to slippery mud, clinging to her skin like the shame in Cato's mother's voice. Every word the older woman spoke had been sharp enough to cut. By the time she finished, Nia felt like she had already been thrown away. You think our son will ruin his future for you? The woman had said, her eyes hard as stone. A poor girl with a child she cannot even prove is his. Nia's hands had trembled, but she kept them on her belly. It is his child, she whispered. I would never lie about something like that. Cato had stood beside his mother, silent, his eyes avoiding hers. That silence hurt more than any insult. It was the silence of someone choosing comfort over truth, family approval over love. Nia waited for him to say something. Anything but. The words never came. The gate creaked open, and one of the guards pointed toward the road. You should leave before the storm worsens, he said, not unkindly, but firmly. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled over the compound like a warning. Rain fell harder, soaking her dress, her braids, her skin. She picked up her small bag, hoping Cato would stop her before she reached the gate. He didn't move. When she stepped onto the dark road outside the compound, it felt like crossing into another world. The streetlights flickered, and the rain blurred everything into shadows and streaks of silver. She walked without direction, her sandals slapping against the wet pavement. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, heart lifting for a moment. Cato's name did not appear. Instead, it was a message from a landlord reminding her about rent she couldn't pay. Her shoulders sagged. Another cramp twisted through her belly. Sharper this time, she stopped under a flickering street lamp, breathing hard. Please, she whispered to the life inside her. Just hold on. But the pain grew stronger. Tears mixed with rain on her face as she kept walking. Cars rushed past, tires hissing on the wet road, their headlights blinding. The world felt too fast, too loud, too cruel. She wondered, for a moment, if anyone would notice if she simply disappeared. A sudden wave of dizziness made her stumble. The road tilted beneath her feet, and she stepped forward without thinking right into the path of oncoming headlights a horn blotted. Tires screamed against wet asphalt. Strong hands grabbed her shoulders and yanked her backward. She felt the rush of air as the car missed her by inches. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed, against the chest of a stranger. "What were you thinking?" A deep voice demanded, breathless. "You could have died." Nia tried to speak, but another cramp tore through her. Warmth spread down her legs, mixing with the rain. She looked down and saw red. I think something's wrong," she whispered. The stranger's expression changed instantly. "Get in the car," he said, guiding her gently. "We're going to the hospital." The drive was a blur of flashing lights and tight turns. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other steadying her shoulder as she trembled. "Stay with me," he said. "You're going to be okay." At the hospital, doctors rushed her into a bright room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. She remembered the sound of machines, the hushed voices, the concerned faces. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. When the doctor finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I'm sorry. The baby didn't make it." The words felt unreal, like something said to someone else. Nia stared at the ceiling, numb. The rain had stopped outside, but inside her, the storm raged on. Later, when she woke again, the stranger sat beside her bed. He looked different without the calm composed, but his eyes were gentle. "You stayed," she said weakly. He nodded. "Someone should have." That was the first time she heard his name. Amani. Back in the present, the car slowed as it approached the hospital gates. Nia opened her eyes, the memory fading like mist. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the steady movement of the child inside. Amani's hand covered hers. "We're here," he said softly. This time, she thought, the storm would not take everything. Morning broke slowly over Makina City, painting the tin roofs in gold and copper light. The air smelled of charcoal fires and fresh bread. Life in the neighborhood stood awake, vendors shouting prices, children running barefoot through dusty alleys, and radios humming with old love songs.